Page 1. Rethinking Human Evolution, by Jeffrey H. Schwartz, 2017. Biology is a leading science in this century. As in all other sciences, progress in biology depends on the interrelations between empirical research, theory building, modeling, and societal context. But whereas molecular and experimental biology have evolved dramatically in recent years, generating a flood of highly detailed data, the integration of these results into useful theoretical frameworks has lagged behind. Driven largely by pragmatic and technical considerations, research in biology continues to be less guided by theory than seems indicated. By promoting the formulation and discussion of new theoretical concepts in the biosciences, this series intends to help fill important gaps in our understanding of some of the major open questions of biology, such as the origin and organization of organismal form, the relationship between development and evolution, and the biological bases of cognition and mind. Theoretical biology has important roots in the experimental tradition of early 20th century Vienna. Paul Weiss and Ludwig von Bertalanffy were among the first to use the term theoretical biology in its modern sense. In their understanding, the subject was not limited to mathematical formalization, as is often the case today, but extended to the conceptual foundations of biology. It is this commitment to a comprehensive and cross-disciplinary integration of theoretical concepts that the Vienna series intends to emphasize. Today, theoretical biology has genetic, developmental, and evolutionary components, the central connective themes in modern biology, but it also includes relevant aspects of computational or systems biology and extends to the naturalistic philosophy of sciences. The Vienna series grew out of theory-oriented workshops organized by the KLI, an international institute for the advanced study of natural complex systems. The KLI fosters research projects, workshops, book projects, and the journal Biological Theory, all devoted to aspects of theoretical biology, with an emphasis in all but not restriction to integrating the developmental, evolutionary, and cognitive sciences. The series editors welcome suggestions for book projects in these domains. Gerd B. Mawan Forthler, Thomas Perdue, Gitrin, SCHA Currency Fur. Preface. In September 2015, a workshop was held at the Konrad Lorenz Institute for Evolution and Cognition Studies in which participants were presented with the challenge of considering for their own fields of study the questions: is paleoanthropology an evolutionary science? Or, are analyses of human evolution biological? The invitation to this gathering began, given the pronouncements about human evolution that dominate anthropology textbooks and frequent the pages of newspapers and sciencey news websites, it would seem that the major questions in paleoanthropology have been answered. Indeed, it is commonplace to read that a new fossil or molecular analysis supports fully or tweaks only a tiny bit scenarios of who's related to whom and how, when, where, and why one species of human relative, hominid, transformed seamlessly into another. If this is so, one may ask, why bother trying to find more fossils, identify another molecule, or seek evidence pertaining to the life history and persistence of any hominid, or to pursue these inquiries with the latest technology, if you already know the story? In light of the impact pronouncements on human evolution have on the public and non-biologically savvy academics, it seems appropriate to convene a workshop that focuses on the disconnect between human evolutionary studies and the theoretical and methodological standards and practice that inform the rest of evolutionary biology. The result of this workshop will hopefully be a broad-based publication that will bring to light assumptions and misconceptions as well as positive and biologically viable aspects of human evolutionary studies. In turn, such wide-ranging collaboration should at the very least make apparent to scholars who assume that the study of human evolution is both biologically and theoretically sound that this is not necessarily or universally correct. More optimistically, Such an endeavor, indeed, challenging may provide a spark of intellectual curiosity among paleoanthropologists and their academic kin that could have long-lasting, positive effects on their disciplines. Although ambitious, I would also hope that some of the insights and recommendations that will emerge from this workshop will become known to the media and disseminated to the public that, after all, accepts pronouncements on human evolution as biologically sound fact. The intention of this workshop was not to dwell on negative aspects of one's area of study, or of human evolutionary studies at large, but for each participant to reflect on her own research in the discipline in which it is situated, to delineate what works, and to consider how she and that field of inquiry might move forward in different, if not also new, ways. The questions: is paleoanthropology an evolutionary science? Or, are analyses of human evolution biological? Were thus meant to provoke personal as well as disciplinary introspection. Consequently, the title of the resulting collective effort, A Rethinking Human Evolution, reflects a participant's rethinking of the state of the appropriate art as she perceives it. In organizing this meeting of minds, I sought representation of a diversity of intellectual pursuits, not only in the more common realms of human evolutionary exploration, but in the presence of outsiders who, through the eyes of a historian, Richard Delisle, and philosopher of science, Siobhan McManus, can offer perspectives and raise questions about aspects of the field that are often unappreciated by practitioners, who often proceed along a certain intellectual path. Specifically, Delisle reviews the history of procedural idiosyncrasies that continue to characterize much of paleoanthropology, and suggests that one way in which the field could become more scientific is by articulating specific rules of engagement that would be open to hypothesis testing and falsification. McManus melds philosophy of science with philosophy of biology and cultural studies of society in taking a philosophy of mind approach to understanding human evolution. If the complexities of mind and society are part of, some component of, human evolution, at what point should we embrace these human innovations in epistemological considerations of our evolutionary past? In their chapters, Delisle and McManus set the stage for the contributions that follow. With regard to inquiries involving the physicality of human evolution, mammalian paleontologists John DeVoe and Jel Reumer remind us that, whatever special qualities one attributes to living humans and perhaps also to their extinct relatives, humans and their relatives are first and foremost mammals, and therefore should be approached phylogenetically, not as special cases as in paleoanthropology, but as a paleontologist would deal with other large mammals. As such, they argue that the evolutionary processes that shaped artiodactyls, parasidactyls, and proboscideans also obtained to hominids. They offer examples of island dwarfing and adaptations to increasing grasslands during the Pleistocene, and also make the case for late Pleistocene hominids, like other large mammals, being endowed with a woolly pelage. Following suit and treating humans as another mammal, I review the history of and the assumptions underlying how paleoanthropologists came and continue to interpret and allocate human fossils to the few taxa that are allowed to encompass the entire human fossil record, why paleoanthropologists deny to humans the possibility of taxic diversity that characterizes the evolutionary past of other mammals. I also discuss the lack of regard many paleoanthropologists have for the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature that every vertebrate paleontologist follows, including the scientific validity of type specimens as the basis for testing the naming of species. Lastly, I review the assumptions that have informed the interpretation of molecular data vis human evolution. Rob DeSale and colleagues pursue the claims derived from genomic analyses on the geographic distribution and evolutionary history of present-day human populations, including their conception as discrete biological units. In doing so, they identify three major problems underlying these claims: the disparity between the large genomic data sets from living humans and the relatively small sampling of, relatively recent, fossil hominids' assumptions regarding the origin of human populational diversity and the assumptions that inform the algorithms from which the clustering of human populations derive. In arguing for integrating genetics with paleontology, archaeology, and paleoclimatology in attempting to understand human evolution, Alan Templeton emphasizes the importance of hypothesis testing, which, unfortunately, is often overlooked or just ignored in paleoanthropological considerations. From a geneticist's perspective, he uses the out of Africa replacement model to illustrate how the reliance on what he identifies as non-informative data and pseudo-hypotheses has sustained an untestable hypothesis. In a similar vein, Michael Petraglia and Hugh Grucut discuss other problems with OA models, especially their basis in historicity and focus on who, what, when, and where questions. Using the disparate histories of populations in the Arabian Peninsula and India as examples, they discuss the problems inherent in drawing direct connections between the past and present, and argue for an evolutionary approach that incorporates and integrates environmental and demographic perspectives. The discussions by DeSalle and colleagues in Templeton also remind us not only to be aware of, but more importantly to understand, the differences between computational approaches to phylogenetic reconstruction. In this regard, the chapters by Peter Waddell, Fred Bookstein, and Marcus Baster demonstrate how one's choice of algorithm, which itself subsumes evolutionary assumptions, impacts one's analysis both of molecular and of morphological data. Waddell tackles the OA versus multi-regional (MR) models for the emergence of modern human populational diversity using primarily data on complete genomic sequences and aspects of skull shape. Interpreting similarity and difference in terms of possible introgression versus divergence, he calculates that Homo sapiens became distinct in South or Southeastern Africa between 150 and 200 km and dispersed in a stepwise, not Mr. process throughout Africa before migrating out 60 to 100 km. Echoing the sentiment of many contributors, Waddell calls for a more complete integration of biological information in addressing the still unsatisfactory conception and definition of species sapiens. Bookstein comes at the problem from the perspective of arithmetic and a philosophy of scientific, specifically paleoanthropological method and rhetoric. He disagrees not only with Waddell's approach, but in general with the use of correlation, regression, principal components, and other metaphors of distance. He provokes rethinking of common practice by describing paleoanthropology. In an effort to move paleoanthropology forward in the realm of the arithmetic, Bookstein emphasizes that, whatever the method, a reliable quantitative science must also include an organized skepticism. Baster approaches a more integrative approach to doing paleoanthropology through not only geomorphometrics but also from a philosophical and theoretical perspective. In reviewing the pros and cons of traditional descriptive morphology versus morphometrics, he argues for a melding, that is, integration, in keeping with the general theme of the volume, of these seemingly disparate and irreconcilable ways of dealing with topology, that is, of analyzing three-dimensional morphology, which is what specimens, whether fossil or recent, present to the paleoanthropologist. Paralleling my point that by maintaining a molecules versus morphology mentality one is falsely dichotomizing a biological continuum, Baster argues that a step forward in phylogenetic analysis would be the melding of the strength of geomorphometrics in deciphering morphological size-shape relationships with the morphologist's focus on the morphological detail necessary to distinguish between primitiveness and derivedness. Robin Denler recounts the history of paleoanthropology in China to illustrate how socio-political history can impact scenarios of human evolution. Specifically, conceptions changed from a broad biological context, in which the important events of vertebrate, including humans, diversification were thought to have occurred in East Asia, to Weidenreich's multi-regional, in situ evolutionary model. Movius claimed that East Asia was a human evolutionary backwater, and, with the rise of ethno-nationalism after the founding of the People's Republic of China, to embracing the Zhao-Cadian hominid as the direct, ancient ancestor of all Chinese. Going deeper in time, Gabrielle Macho tackles the problem of interpreting hominid origins by highlighting that humans are the sole survivors of a specious group. She questions the validity of choosing a specific ape as a model from which to reconstruct the last common ancestor of all hominids, which also makes clear that our closest living relative is not necessarily our closest relative. Toward a more comprehensive endeavor, Macho argues that paleoanthropologists should focus on the plasticity of closely related and ecologically similar species, and integrate the study of morphology, development, geography, paleoclimatology, and genetics. Archaeology, of course, also redounds on the understanding of early human behavior, which Thomas Plummer and Emma Finestone consider in terms of an adaptive shift in human evolution as represented by the appearance of the old stone tool technology at East African sites dated approximately 2.6 to 1.7 Mayan, and the implications for hominid manipulation of a variety of other resources. Beyond acknowledging that early hominids transported and used high-quality raw material for producing stone flakes, they highlight how little is known about the function of these tools. They call for research that integrates the interpretation of human fossils with archaeologically derived insights about hominid adaptation and behavior. Dietrich Stout discusses the question, should human evolutionary studies stress the uniqueness of human nature, and thus a unique human evolutionary history, also addressed by McManus and Cohen, or try to be predictive and based in general laws? See also Delisle. Using Robin Dunbar's social brain hypothesis and derivative scenarios of human brain evolution, brain size constrains group size, thus increase in group size provokes increase in brain size. As a platform from which to consider this question, he argues not for one side or the other, but both sides of the coin. Stout concludes that a better understanding of human brain evolution must come from an integration of archaeology and paleontology with comparative and evolutionary biology. In his consideration of increase in brain size, Ian Tattersall points out that while it is evident that this event occurred at least 3 times in separate hominid lineages, it remains unclear why or how this occurred and whether the pattern was the same in each instance. While acknowledging that there is a correlation between complex behavior and increased brain volume, he argues that modern symbolic reasoning is not only unique to Homo sapiens, but that its emergence was epiphenomenal, that is, after the appearance of morphologically identifiable humans. Specifically, Tattersall points to the invention of language as the likely agent provocateur of symbolic reasoning and its more economical use of brain matter. To conclude this volume, Claudine Cohen approaches human evolution with an eye toward the influences of reproductive physiology and behavior. In doing so, she emphasizes the importance of female anatomy and physiology such as the menstrual cycle, the absence of estrus, concealed ovulation, and life after the reproductive phase that, perhaps even from the very time of emergence of hominids, have contributed to the pattern of human evolution. Cohen argues further that understanding reproductive behavior provides a window on the importance of interaction between cultural as well as biological factors in human evolution. We all hope these thoughts and introspections will contribute both to explicating as well as to broadening the intellectual diversity that characterizes the study of human evolutionary. Jeffrey H. Schwartz, December 24, 2016. Page 15. Contributors from a range of disciplines consider the disconnect between human evolutionary studies and the rest of evolutionary biology. The study of human evolution often seems to rely on scenarios and received wisdom rather than theory and methodology, with each new fossil or molecular analysis interpreted as supporting evidence for the presumed lineage of human ancestry. We might wonder why we should pursue new inquiries if we already know the story. Is paleoanthropology an evolutionary science? Are analyses of human evolution biological? In this volume, contributors from disciplines that range from paleoanthropology to philosophy of science consider the disconnect between human evolutionary studies and the rest of evolutionary biology. All of the contributors reflect on their own research and its disciplinary context, considering how their fields of inquiry can move forward in new ways. The goal is to encourage a more multifaceted intellectual environment for the understanding of human evolution. Topics discussed include paleoanthropology's history of procedural idiosyncrasies, the role of mind and society in our evolutionary past, humans as large mammals rather than a special case, genomic analyses, computational approaches to phylogenetic reconstruction, descriptive morphology versus morphometrics, and integrating insights from archaeology into the interpretation of human fossils.